this because yeah, so I don't have any blood.
Okay, so now we have 4 with 3. Okay, we now have 6 group, 4 with 4 members and 2 with 3 members. At the end again. Okay, so good enough. All right. In fact, they are. I think there are more names on the class
maybe they will
now.
come next week.
Yeah, and then we can probably need to make some adjustment still. Okay. All right. So anyway, we have to continue with this one. So we have to get finishing now. All right. So the second case we will look into is this Procter and Gamble, PNG. Right. Yeah. Now there are so many organizational charts in this case, and we were going to look. We were going to examine them one after another. So they have like a divisional structure in the U.S., which was later reorganized into a matrix structure. In the Europe, they started with a geographic structure, and then they reorganized into category and functional structure. Okay, but it's a bit weird that you have different organizational configuration in the U.S. and Europe, so you have to bring them on the same page. So they developed this global matrix structure in the 1995, and in 1999 they restructured again. They have all this something like organization 2005. Okay, so we will look into the development. Okay. Now this was what the organizational structure in US was like in the very early period, this so-called divisional structure. As you can see, there are different divisions under which you have like complete business functions with sales. Each division has its own sales, R&D, manufacturing, and different brands. And another thing that is worthy to note is that they actually have a competitive brand management system where different brand managers can compete with one another for performance evaluation, career opportunities. Okay, now of course this structure has its good and bad. So we probably have to think about what the rationale of implementing that structure back at the old time in the US market. In other words, what this organizational structure is good for. Under what type of environmental context would you find implementing this kind of organizational structure more effective? Yes, please.
Maybe when it's local,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have international divisions.
Okay.
So it's very linear. Like
Okay.
You have one homogeneous market in the past,
Okay.
and then you just have brands, and that's the only division.
Right. So geographic boundaries are no major issue. US is huge, but I mean the market, the homogeneity is high enough such that you can utilize the division-based structure as your primary foundation for divisional labor. Now what else? So homogeneity across the geographic operation. That's one. What else? Yes, please.
When maybe the technology or the market is changing or updating very fast. So like each division has its own manufacturing and R&D, so it's
Right.
like more agile for them to adjust themselves.
Okay. So we know that by putting together all the functional development, all the different business functions under a common organizational boundary, you facilitate integration across them, and as a result, as a division, you can respond more quickly. Okay, so this structure will work better in the following situation. The first, there exists significant differences across different divisions. Okay, the second thing is that you see a dynamic involvement in each division, so that you have to respond quickly. Okay, in that sense, this makes sense. What else? Right. So if there are high degree of similarity between these two, so it probably does not make sense for them to have their own independent sales and R&D and manufacturing. It's going to be a duplicated of resource, kind of low efficiency. Okay. Yes, please. No. Yes.
But it would be good if, for example, like in case of P&G, they have
Right.
quite a diverse product lines. Like
Right.
they are both in food industry and detergent
Mhm.
industry, for example.
Right.
So probably R&D in for detergents would be
Right.
definitely different from
Okay.
R&D in food industry.
Okay.
So in that case, you cannot really combine them because that's going to be a mess.
Okay. No, I will probably have to reinterpret what you have just said in a dynamic sense. So they were diversifying, and as a result, we see nowadays that P&G has very diverse portfolios within the consumer business sectors. But they were diversifying at the moment that this structure being implemented. So another advantage of this structure is to facilitate application, right? Whenever you try to venture into a new business, you create a new business division. If you have something that is more like integrated, and then you try to create a new line of business, and then there's a coordination issues with regard to how this line of business is going to get access to the sales and R&D, the manufacturing is like common or central pool of resources, and you're a small business, how are you going to get access to that, right? It's better to have your own territory. So you have secure, you have a protected source of resource, protected pool of independent resources that you can draw from to grow your new business. Okay, so this type of organizational structure is effective when you try to achieve growth by diversification. Okay.
And although in the starting they started with candle and then soap making part.
Right.
Although these are different products,
Mm-hmm.
but they both can be sold through the same supply chain.
Okay.
Like the retail stores basically.
Okay.
So if we consider sales are different here,
Right.
but we can have a same sales team for
Mhm.
both the products.
Okay.
Like in the initial stage they were having just two
Right.
products.
Right.
Say, soap and candle. So they can have a same sales team for selling both the products to the retail chain,
Okay.
and instead of having different sales team.
Right. Okay. So this is so basically you're saying that you have different brands, but they basically going through the similar sales channel. So you only need sales. So brand is basically about marketing, right? So for marketing, they have a competitive system. Well, what's the rationale for this? Why do you want your people to compete against one another? In fact, why do you want your marketing guys to compete with one another? What is this good for? When you basically have the same sales team for them. Right? Salespeople are the same, but brands are different. Yes, please.
Maybe they wanted to capture the entire market,
Mhm.
and thereby they would want to have brands to capture each of the
Right.
market segment.
Right.
Let's say for the premium segment, they will have a different brand. For
Right.
Lower market segment, they will have different brand.
Right.
And these brands will not be competing with each other.
Mhm.
They will have a different target segment.
Okay.
And thereby it makes sense to have different brands
Right.
within each product.
Right. So what we see, at least what we saw in the U.S. at that time, is that this is a rapidly growing economies, and there are so many niche over there which are expanding. So what you want is this very aggressive brand managers who will be able to seize the growth opportunity here and there as quickly as possible. Okay? So you create a competitive spirit to push them to run. That's what you do. Okay? So another implication is that this system probably works better in a growing market with a sufficient number of differentiated niches within a particular business division. Okay? Outside of this context, this is probably the most ideal design. Okay? So there are quite a number of things that you have to take into consideration. If you look at this is probably they have to change this. Okay? Now let's move on to the next structure. Okay. So this is the second structure being established in the U.S., which appears far more complicated than the previous one. Right? So what do we see here? So you have like U.S. sales, U.S. R&D, and U.S. manufacturers functions under the US president. So these are like corporate level functions or country level functions, right? And then you have different division, for example, a division for household cleaning and household division for for laundries. Okay, now below that you have different categories. Okay, under different category you have different brands. And not only you have different brands, but you also have category sales, category R&D, and category manufacturing. Okay, now under the division, you also have division sales, division R&D, and division manufacturing. So all across different levels. Okay, and then these different layers of business function are connected together through this kind of dashed line metric kind of relationship, right? Another thing they do differently is that they pretty much reduce the level of competition between different brands and try to manage these brands as a brand portfolio. Okay? So why do they have to do this? Yes, please.
When the market was already big enough and their business, like maybe grew 10 times bigger than the
Okay.
previous business, so they have to pursue the economy of scale. So
Right.
it is very necessary for them to separate, especially the R&D and manufacturing as
Okay.
a separate division.
Okay. In a way, each division still maintains its own sales, right? In fact, they create one additional layer, right? So if you look at this, under the division, in the old divisional structure, each division has its own sales R&D manufacturing. It's the same thing here, right? Division has its own divisional sales, division R&D, and division manufacturing, right? But then they create additional layer of sales and R&D manufacturing at the category level. So pretty much it's like they used to have only like division and brand level, and now they introduce something in between, which is called category, right? And then for all of this, they all have their own functional structure. Why would they want to do this? What do they get from this?
Because they had so many brands and different products,
Right.
so that they couldn't basically put all the manufacturing or R&D together
Right.
in one or several places.
Okay, okay. Any further comments? Yes.
Maybe similar brands on the same markets have started to cannibalize each other,
Mm-hmm.
and it became more about winning more market share
Right.
in a category than
Right.
within the brands.
Right, right. So that's why you need to introduce the intermediate layer category to manage the brands and to manage the brands as a portfolio and reduce the sale cannibalization, because the market is not growing that fast as in the past. Okay, the reason I highlight these boxes with color is because they are newly added organizational units, right? They were not here before, right? And basically with the new structure, you have these new animals and all these new animals. Yes, please.
They also said something that they wanted to create mini US
Mhm.
basically within the country.
Okay.
So that would be like this areas where they have what they have on a country level, they would have in each like state basically.
Okay.
And I think for me this looks like a transitional step
Okay.
before you actually have
Mhm.
much more categories.
Okay.
Yeah, because it looks like this is just a way to like separate it before it gets really big.
Okay. Okay. So some kind of transitional stages. Yes,
Were
please.
they trying to reduce the efficiency or the duplicates? Because in the old model, like each division, each market has its own R&D, right?
Right.
And maybe they were trying to integrate all the R&D together and like to reduce the cost. Because sometimes they probably do the same R&D in different areas.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So in the old days, each division has its own R&D,
Right.
and now each category under division has its own R&D. Right? So they actually add more. But on the other hand, they also add centralized R&D function. And these are connected in some unknown way, not clearly articulated. right? When you try to integrate, what we typically do is to reduce the number of additional units who are carrying like similar or highly related functions. But that's not what we see here, right? They're adding more.
And also, I'm just curious about how this division R&D actually report, because it looks like two different directions. One is to US R&D, never mind, it's just the operating below that.
Right. I mean, -9 means this is minor, the minor part, right? So the major responsibility, your boss should be here, but you also are supposed to work with people over there and down there. Yes, please.
Initially, they started with 2 divisions,
Mm-hmm.
but later on when they were going up, they added more and more divisions. Hence,
Right.
it was difficult to manage all the divisions, sales, R&D, and manufacturing. That's why
Mhm.
they need a centralized sales, R&D, and manufacturing at the country level,
Right.
at the US level. And
Right.
at the same time, for each division, there are different categories of products,
Right.
and thereby they would need teams in sales, R&D, and manufacturing in those also. So that also for each category, they would also like to capture in entire market, and thereby they will have different brands.
Mm-hmm.
So thereby they are at same levels at the category after the category.
Okay, okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that on this figure, we're only showing the different business function associated with one particular business division. But they have a lot of this. So if you look at things from the perspective of, for example, the US R&D Center, they actually have to deal with like division R&D, category R&D, with this division, that division, and many other divisions. So the structure is actually very complicated. Okay, so what the rationale for doing this? Okay, now we probably have to divide this broader. Yes.
I think part of the rationale was that they were preparing to become more global, because
Okay.
did mention that significant overseas sales
Right.
were growing.
Right, right.
And then perhaps they thought by realigning the organization this way, they could respond to globally better.
Okay, okay. That probably means that you have to consolidate the resources and activities in the US better, so that you can leverage them across border more effectively. So that suggests a need for consolidation integration, which is probably understandable for this part, right? As you have suggested, this probably represents some kind of transition stages, right? You cannot all of a sudden taken away these sales and R&D and manufacturing from the divisions. Okay, so what do? You first start with creating the sales, R&D, and manufacturing center, okay, and connect them with the center through some dashed line relationship as a beginning. So this part is probably understandable. Chances are, in fact, it did not really happen to some certain extent. But one possible development is that maybe this is a transitional stage. At a later stage, you're going to consolidate this activity and resources toward the center. Okay, but what is not totally understandable is why you add an additional layer of category R&D below if consolidation is your goal. You know what I'm saying, right? So if your goal is to move this activity into the center, you don't try to create more decentralized units that were not there before.
Is it because as the market matures more,
Mhm.
you need a higher degree of specialization?
Okay.
So that's why they needed to, even if a laundry division had to be broken down into more specialized units,
Okay.
so those units needed a specialized R&D to
Okay.
further differentiate the particular brand or product.
Okay, okay. Okay, so perhaps another possible development, which may or may not happen in this case, is that you want to create a division between those manufacturing or R&D activity that should be centralized and those that should be not. So maybe your own objective is to push some of this toward the center, or delegate some of this to a lower level of the market to increase the responsiveness in each individual category. That's one possibility. But you move from somewhere in the middle. So you start with with managing resource as the division of labor, but your long-term objective is to have central activity versus highly localized activities. Okay, so you establish this and with the idea of splitting them up at some stage in the later. That's possible. Okay, so that's how that structure is, so keep in mind what they have done. And then let's look at the situation in the US. In Europe. Now, back at that point, European Union was not there yet, and there were significant barriers across different countries. So it is understandable that you start with different countries organization on the top. Okay, and follow from there. They don't have division. There's no division. They go straight into the category. Okay, under the category is pretty much the same story as in the US. So you have different brands and all kinds of business functions. Okay, this is easy understandable when the barrier between countries remain high, that the feasible organization structure you could have. Okay, now of course with the further integration of the European countries, they have to change. And this is what it looked like at the end, in the early 80s. Okay, so you have like central R&D, manufacturing and finance function. Okay, notice that there is no sales here. Okay, unlike in this case. Okay. Okay, and then following from there, you have different division. Okay, follow from the division, you have different locations or different countries. The different countries, each country has its own brand management. Okay, followed by its own R&D, its own manufacturing, and its own finance. Okay, another thing to know is that at least on this organizational chart or on the formal organizational chart, there is no dotted line relationship. No such thing. It's not a matrix structure. It's simply category followed by country followed by business function. Okay, what do we get from this? What's the possible rationale for this organizational structure?
Because PND is a US company, so
Right.
in terms of R&D and manufacturing stuff,
Right.
it's important to collaborate with the United States
Okay.
more compared
Okay.
to internal European countries.
Okay.
So that's why they're trying to set different rates compared to the regional members.
Okay, so because back at that time, most of the R&D and manufacturing resources, as well as finance resources, probably concentrated in the US. So the connection within Europe were not that essential. What is more important is actually be how you collaborate with the US. So that's probably explained, at least partially, why they did not try to establish a dashed line relationship within Europe, across the hierarchies. Yes?
Europe has lots of countries in the same area, and
Right.
their P&G products needs to be very localized
Right,
to
right.
their cultures.
Right.
So they are focusing on developing the very localized products.
Right. So that's why under each country category, you will need a full-fledged, like a complete set of business function. Yes, please.
What I think is that during the 80s, France and Germany were the major markets in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Thereby, they needed a separate R&D and other functions
Right.
country-wise.
Okay.
But for the rest of the Europe,
Okay.
the they were not much into those markets, so
Okay.
thereby they needed one central Europe R&D and other functions.
Okay, I see.
So they don't have direct connection with the country, the France and Germany R&D and all other.
Right.
functions.
Okay.
So for operating business in other parts of Europe, and let's say for setting a pilot project and then starting business of there, they are
Right.
having a separate division.
Okay, so for like, as you say, like German and France are very large markets. So the size or scale of the market can justify the operation of all these business activity. But for smaller markets, you probably would not do this. But instead, you probably would draw the resources support from the European headquarters. So these were not shown on the organizational chart, because if you try to draw everything, I mean, probably need a, I don't know where it will go.
helps a company to focus on each market and to take care of each segment in the market.
Okay.
But as the scale grows, as the network.
Right. Okay, so this structure were better under this historical setting, but situation will change, so we will see how they do it later. Okay, so this is the European structure in the early 80s. Oh, this was the US structure in 1987. Okay, now if you are running a global business, it's a nature for you to have different organizational structure in your two key locations, the US and Europe. So they try to increase the level of consistency. Now this is what they end up with after they consolidate their US and Europe and operation in other places. Okay, so as you can see, they have like productions here, and then they have sales, and then R&Ds, and these are like global categories, basically marketing function, and each under each category they have their own global category R&Ds. Okay, and then this is the region-based organization. So under different region they have region category, and then country category, and then country brands and country sales. Okay, and then there are some kind of complicated dash line relationship across. Okay, so how can we make sense of this organizational structure? What is this? Yes, please.
They want to promote some more global integration.
Okay.
Specifically, they want to take advantage of the R&D capabilities across the
Okay.
entire globe.
Okay, so that's why they answer with this. Okay.
The other thing is to add is they mentioned that the speed in which they can globalize a new product was
Mhm.
very slow in the whole
Mhm.
structure. And using, hopefully, by doing this, they can increase the speed in which they can bring new products to market.
Okay, so how does this structure help them to increase the speed to market in comparison to the older one in the US or in Europe? Yes, please.
So I notice in the country categories that there's something good going on, something
Okay.
more out to the market.
Right.
The dotted line reports to the global categories.
Okay.
And it connects it to global category R&D.
Okay.
So it provides some more innovation. It's kind of, I think
Okay.
it can like work as a feedback loop for
Okay.
like if there's a good country brand, the global categories will know about it and that they can decide what to do with that information globally.
Okay. So you're talking about this relationship over here, and the global category control its own global category on. And not only that, each regional category also has its own region on.
That too.
Yes, please.
I actually used to work for a company that supplies stainless chemicals,
Right.
P&G, and we had exact same structure.
You mean like this one?
Yes.
Okay.
The idea was that we want to follow the same as our customers so that it's easier to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they might have the same sauce behind because
Okay.
first of all, why you create the regional categories is that you can actually create account managers.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, I guess it would be country sales.
Right.
So it's a person who usually your clients contact to, and it's your first contact
right.
guy in the company.
Right.
And then usually in order to sell something to the clients, usually
Right.
they would have sales, the
Mhm.
account manager, and R&D. And
Okay.
R&D would be the person who actually helps them to do the right blending. For
Okay.
example, in this case, it would be like detergent, right?
Right.
Like the right chemical mix. And then also in terms of why there should be global sales and region category sales, is that usually it would be the region category sales that would work with the customers,
Mhm.
but then sometimes it would be they would borrow people from global sales
Okay.
for expertise, and
Right.
it was done so that there was a more like easy way of borrowing employees between departments. That's why it was, at least in our company, dotted, because you are under the region category sales managers or like boss,
Right, right.
but you can still help out to the global or vice
Okay,
versa.
okay. So for example, the linkage here, you have access to this,
Yeah.
which is at least have some dot line
Yeah,
connection
so
with
it's like
the global
you kind
sales
of
team.
work both places, but you're not with your boss.
Okay, okay. Yes, please.
So, different countries, let's say I have a product, let's say P&G have a product,
Right,
but let's say we have, he's selling shampoo.
right,
But the culture and preference of each country is different.
right.
And thereby it's very important for the company to localize the product. And thereby they would need a country category.
Right.
It cannot have the same product which will work in the other market.
Okay.
It has to localize that product in those markets. That is why it is important to have country categories and region
Right.
categories.
Right,
So that you
right.
can localize the products.
Okay, okay. So because different countries probably have different need for that, you need like to adjust your product. So that's why you need to have this direct access to global category, which need to control its own kind of some extent, to certain extent, some of the R&D resources, so they can develop the product to meet the need of different local demands and corresponding to different categories.
This also helps to address issues with MNCs, with
Mhm.
multiple, I guess, very big clients who operate across different countries
Right,
or different
right,
regions.
right.
And those linkages between the global sales and regional sales
Mhm.
and country sales, I think that helps to address those issues.
Okay, right. Now, let's think about this. Okay, so if there are no problems associated with the organizational structure, they probably wouldn't want to change further. Let's suggest there are some problems with this structure. What are the major limitations here? We have by far focusing on the positive aspect of this organizational structure. But there must be some problem here, otherwise you don't need to change. In fact, they change quite substantially. The next structure is very different from this one. Yes, please.
I think this structure, global member is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Power, they have strong power
Okay.
comparing to the regional team. But
Mhm.
in order to operate globally, it's important to strengthen the regional members' skills as well.
Okay.
So in this case, it's very difficult to motivate countries, like each country's members.
Right. Okay. Now, because at the country level, they don't have independent functional teams, right? The in terms of location or geography-based functions, these are organized at the region level. You don't have too many regions, right? So if you are working, if your responsibility is constrained within a particular country, there are only two things that you can do. The first is local brand management. The second is sales. End of story. Okay? So if you believe it is important for you to gather initiative and develop people in different local countries, this is probably not the best structure. And you need to empower the people working in a particular country. Offer them a better opportunity to develop themselves over the long run. If they are only like sales and doing local brand management, this is not satisfactory. In fact, if you are really good, you probably will not be satisfied with this kind of responsibility area. Okay, what else? Right, probably you want to get more from the countries. Yes, please.
We can move the region category. I don't know what is region president is there.
Mm-hmm.
We can move the region categories within global categories.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I would like to remove the categories and instead have a product divisions.
Okay.
And within product divisions, I would have different categories. First the countries and then categories. will make sense because it will help to reduce the number of management between at different levels. Because currently, if you have different number of categories and more number of brands, it will the management managing all these categories will be a difficult problem.
Right. Yeah, the problem probably exists between this, like a coordination and division of labor between this. Because if you think about this, regional category management, what do they do now? They probably deal with not just R&D, then marketing. And what do? They also deal with marketing and sales. So they are like sometimes some kind of overlap that you have to resolve. Yes, please.
In addition to that tension, there's also the problem mentioned earlier that the global functions seem to be very powerful and maybe they're not as willing to cooperate with each other. They all kind of just want to protect their territory and consolidate their power instead of working together to launch products globally.
Okay. That will be particularly problematic when we really need to adjust in accordance with local demands. If this is highly standardized across the globe, then it's okay to have people in the center to dominate everything. But like products supplies probably okay. I don't know, sales would not be okay. That sense. Okay. Yes, please.
I think actually the region categories are much more powerful than global categories because they get the direct responsibility for region category R&D, sales, product and supply, while the global functions only get the dotted line.
Okay.
So I guess when it comes down to making decisions between region and global categories,
Right.
It's region categories who get last say.
Right. Yeah, we can try to imagine what this organization will be like. Right? If you are running the regional category, you are running more likely as profit and loss center because you have direct contact with the clients, right? So you can generate revenue by yourself. So at the same time, you also control your own R&D, sales, and production resources. Okay? But look at this design. Global categories, they have no direct contacts with the client, which means that they cannot generate revenue themselves. So they are cost center. They are dependent on others. And what do they control? They control category R&D. But then you have a global R&D team above you, and then you have a regional category R&D below you. So exactly what you do, right? You're pretty much doing things that other people don't want to do, and you probably cannot do too much about it because you depend on the revenue that they generate for you, right? So that one possibility is that because of this, when it's come to the interaction between these units, this is probably more dominating, right? Now, if you believe that the integration at the category level across the globe is important, then this kind of design is not, optimal. Because if the regional category function is more powerful than the global category function, you know that in the actual implementation is going to be fragmented. In many organizations, it's probably important for your career. You have to try to control the client relationship as much as possible. If there are arrangements that separate you from external clients, that's usually bad for you. You want to keep a connection with people on the top and keep connection with external stakeholders who are important to your organization. Okay, so let's look at the new organizational structure that they implemented 4 years from that point. Okay, now, this is interesting. So they have global business units and regional market development offices and global business services. Okay? So under regional market development offices, they have country general managers who are responsible for sales. Okay? Under the global business management, they have global category, global category R&D, global category product supplies, and global category ITs. And under global category, they have global brands, which basically do marketing. okay? And they are treated differently in terms of the performance measurement or the expectation. I mean, performance measurement is reflect your responsibility and expectation for you, right? For the global business units, they operate as profit and loss centers. So these are P&L centers. Okay? For regional management development, these are sales team. The major performance indicator is the growth. You have to grow the revenue. For the global business services, it's about efficiency and cost saving. Okay, so that's the organization structure. What do we get from this? Notice that there is no centralized R&D, product supplies, or like even ITs across different categories. These are like divided into different business. Right, so what I mean, this no longer exists. These are eliminated, okay, and move under the global business units. Yes, please.
We'll start the corporate venture.
Mhm.
Corporate venture will basically encourage entrepreneurship within the organization.
Right, so that's a new unit, yes.
And it will help the company to venture into new businesses and then add it into the GBUs later.
Okay. Okay. Now, our next week we will look into two cases about corporate venture, so we can talk more about how to implement corporate venture. In fact, it's kind of complicated. Yes, please.
Actually, this feels like they went back to the divisional structure where the GBUs are kind of like the product divisions with its own R&D, product supply functions.
Okay. The one thing that was stripped out of this is the sales function.
Yes.
Right? So now they're responsible for marketing, R&D, production. I'm not sure why they put IT here, but at least the sales is detached from it. Any reflections? How would you interpret this organizational chart? Yes, please.
Did they not have IT under the global business services?
That's an interesting question, but
Yeah.
that's the organizational chart they represent to us.
I think they must have,
Mm-hmm.
because in the cases that one of their tasks is to implement the
Right.
single SAP system for the
Right,
whole
right.
company. So there should be some of the IT responsibility under the global business.
Right. So most likely, yes, if you are running global business, this is about the infrastructure part. It's hard to imagine that you don't do IT. So more likely you have IT at this level and IT at the category level as well.
Yeah, sorry. According to this chart, they do have the central IT business
Right.
Services and IT business solutions.
Right.
But then under the GBUs, they also have what they call GBU IT.
Right, exactly. So
So it seems like some duplication.
Right.
They didn't specify what the GBU IT unit.
Right, exactly. So they have IT here and IT there. So this suggests to you that different business divisions must have their own unique needs for IT infrastructure.
Right.
Otherwise, it does not make sense. Yes, please.
So basically, PNG operates in the FMCG market.
Mm-hmm.
So for FMCG market, the supply chain is same, thereby you can have the same country sales team instead of divided into different product sales team.
Okay.
Because integrated sales team can sell the different products to the same supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. So basically, you sell different product. You sell the product you sell in different markets can be supplied through the unified supply chain under the management of global business units. Yes, please.
But there's no like integration or consolidation of, for example, the supply with R&D across different
Right, exactly.
GBUs.
Right.
Like if you were two different GBUs that, for example, sell products into the retail channel,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't you want to combine and leverage the supply chain, for example.
Okay. So because this figure only show you one particular GBU, but you actually have multiple, many of these, right? So from the perspective of country general managers, you're selling across different global business units, which means that you have to get access across different supply chain under the management of different global business units. Now, in fact, it is not very clear how you do it on the organizational chart. Notice there are no dotted line horizontal connection. So if you only adhere to the formal structure, what do you have to do? As a country manager, you have to report your need to the regional head. The regional head will try to communicate with the global business unit's head under the mediation of the CEO. If they reach a consensus, the GBU will go down and try to direct the resources to you. Right? And you probably have to do it like 7 different times. You have to be in contact with 7 different global business units. Okay, so at least 2 things are here. The first is that it is unclear how the resources across global business units are integrated. Okay, since you have pretty much dispersed this R&D supply, production, supply chain, and even IT resources and marketing resources across different global business units, and you have removed these 3 global units. Okay, so it's not clear. You don't have this. It's gone. Okay, the second thing is that the horizontal connections between sales and marketing and R&D and manufacturing and IT were missing. There's no dash line linkages, right? So if you follow this structure for any matter that require coordination across, you will have to go through the formal hierarchy. Okay, if that's the organizational structure, imagine that you are in a position of a country general managers. Now you are really unhappy about the product designs associated offered by particular global business units. Under this organizational chart, what are you likely to do? Would you speak to the regional head and ask him to ask for intervention from the CEO to get in touch with global business unit head so that they can modify their design to meet your needs? What is that you're going to do? Or just no, I don't want to get CEO involved, so I will just forget about it. Or you probably have other strategy to make this work. Yes, please.
In this global R&D, we have regional R&D also, right? It is not shown here, but do they have?
You mean the R&D resources is not organized by categories, no longer by geography. So if you're operating in France, you don't have an R&D team in France. No, you don't have those. They are under central management. But probably there are R&D staff in France, I don't know. Most likely there will be, but they are not under the geography line of command. It's not under if you're running a country manager. If you are a country manager, it's not under your commands. They are not under the commands of your regional head, maybe European vice president or something. They are under the global business unit somewhere in US. They report to the Americans.
Then there will be communication problem.
Okay.
Because country team will not be able to communicate directly to the regional category because there is no regional category. So you have to talk to global, and you cannot exercise your power on the global level. You are working on a country level, so you don't have any power to take decisions at the global level.
Yes,
you would have to maybe rely on personal connections if the country general manager happens to know some people in the GBUs,
right,
and maybe they can establish some communication channel.
Right.
But otherwise, have to escalate all the way up to the CEO and then down, and then it would take too long before they can respond.
Right. And you do it 3 times, CEO
Yeah.
will be mad at you. So you don't do that. So this structure actually gives you some motivation to establish informal connections with those R&D guys in France. Maybe you will feel obligated to bring them for lunch or dinner because you know that you cannot rely on the formal channel. Okay, so that's probably that's probably one reason they do this, right? It's so obvious. The lack of formal connection is so obvious. It's not possible that top management at P&G cannot see that. They certainly see this. They must do this for a reason. Okay, so because of the lack of horizontal connections and your general reluctance of getting the CEO or top management involved all the time, so this push or at least create pressure for these people under different lines of command to establish informal connections. Now, you know this is not the end of story. From the perspective of running an organization like this, you also know that you have to provide people with the opportunity of building up horizontal connection to make this work. Right? So on the formal front, in terms of formal organizational design, we can remove the -9 linkages to include the clarity of the organization. Okay? But this will, the problem, the side effect, the downside of that is that you reduce the efficiency of horizontal connection. Now, instead of finding or going for the formal remedies, you try for the informal solutions. You try to create content through which these people working under different vertical line of command can establish informal linkage with one another, so that they can coordinate without creating additional burden to the formal bureaucracy. Okay, that's one possibility. Yes, please.
I believe the global brands managers really need to help with, from the country sales teams.
Right.
To launch, for example, the new product campaign or something like that. So they, from the global business unit side,
Right.
they definitely need the connection,
Right.
informal connection with the visual MTU team.
Right, right. In fact, they highly depend on sales team because look at this. They are profit and loss centers, which means they have to generate revenues, right? But under this organizational structure, these are all cost centers. They cannot generate the revenue themselves, right? So chances are some of the revenue generated by the local sales team are allocated through some kind of criteria or some kind of formulas to them. So unless you can help these guys, you're going to suffer. So although the horizontal connections are there, with this kind of incentive design, you create a pressure for them to work with them nonetheless. Okay, so it's go for both ways. So earlier we talked about a case where a country manager, they need to modify the products, right? And they have incentive to establish like informal connection with those global category R&D also residing in France. Okay, the same thing applies to those global brand managers or global category managers reside at any place in the world. To generate sales, they rely on local sales team. Without their sales, you not generate revenue. You keep creating you keep accumulating costs but no revenue. But your performance evaluation criteria is not efficiency, but your profit margin. So you have to help them to create revenue. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So in a way, this is kind of like a mutual. Both parties, or both the sales and this global business unit manager, have the motivation to work closely with one another. Right, so I mean, another thing to take note is that you ask a manager who does not control the revenue generating function to take a P&L responsibility. This naturally creates dependence of him on the revenue generating units. Yes, please.
I actually have a question because in the case it seems that when they like started to implement this new organizational chart,
Right.
in the beginning, everything seemed going very well. Like their stock price reached a historically high
Right,
point.
right.
But I don't know why, but after about 1 year, like things changed drastically. But
Right.
is there anything related to the transformation of the organizational chart?
Yeah, let's think about this. Are there problems associated with this organizational design?
But if there are some problems, how to explain that in the beginning everything like showed immediately like acceleration in all of the business performance?
I guess usually when I see this kind of dramatic change in performance, I will attribute it to the environment, not what you have done. I mean, you cannot solve like organizational issues as complicated as this in like overnight. Right? It usually take a long time for a thing to materialize. This case does not provide us with the information about how you actually do the transition. How do you actually move from this to this? We don't know. But we have done from other cases before that how you go from this stage to that stage will be very important, right? We don't know. Yeah, but one thing we can think about, what are the problems associated with this? Or put it in another way, if you want to like fine tune or improve this organizational structure, what would you do? Any suggestion? What do you do to improve? Yes, please.
Maybe remain some of the characteristics from the previous organizational chart.
Okay.
Like for example, don't let sales and marketing completely like they did, but
Okay.
try to integrate the departments like global business services. Try to reduce cost by integrate those functions together, but do not remain some of the matrix relationship like the
Okay.
old organization.
Okay, so talking about splitting the sales and marketing function, in the old structure, at least under the area or region management, the sales and marketing are under the same command. Okay, but then at the same time, you also have global strategy, global marketing function, or global R&D, category R&D, which is different thing. But then they decided to move this completely and put it here. Yes, please.
Alright, my suggestion would be further, you can further streamline this by, I guess, consolidating, for example, product supply and IT on the GPU side. Maybe make it like a shared service, or maybe even put it under GBS, right? Because I understand the need for specialized R&D under different GPUs, but
right.
moving the product from here to there, that doesn't seem like it's something that needs to be very, very specific to the
Right.
product.
Right.
Or maybe establish some committee, like similar to the World Boards,
Okay.
the Corning case,
Okay.
of having country managers as well as the GPU leadership on the same kind of team to when they want to implement some new initiatives.
Okay. Now, yes, WordBoard may be one solution, but one thing to know is that in the case of Corning, WordBoard is some kind of transitional measure. After they put the product management and sales under the same guy, I mean the COO, the non-family professional member, they no longer need that because I mean you have a unified line of commands now. You're under the same boss. Right? But in this case, they don't. So maybe one solution is to create some kind of informal forum or semi-formal forums to bring these people together. Any further comments? Or you can improve on this? Yes.
Not necessarily improvement, but I did read specifically attributed to some success to the globalized R&D.
Okay.
And it was a case regarding P&G trying to globalize the SK2 brand, which was originated in Japan.
Right.
And by having a globalized R&D team, they were able to take what was originally a very local product and globalize it.
Okay.
So that was one merit, I guess, of this
Mhm.
model.
Okay. It's probably in contrast to the previous because you already got global R&D even at this stage.
Right.
It's more in comparison to the even older structure, I guess. Okay. Now, so sequence development, they reduced the number of GBU from 7. So when they implemented this structure, they had a total of 7 global business units to 3, which were household care and beauty and health care. And this was acquired. So chances are they're going to consolidate further at a later stage. Now we can understand why they do this. Because one problem you have identified earlier is that under this structure, the coordination across the different business units are unclear. Right? So one way to improve the coordination is just simply reduce the number of GBUs. Of course, you will end up increasing the burden of global GBU heads. Okay, so selective focus and investment on largest and most profitable brands. So one problem they have, or one issue they encountered in this decline of performance was that they had way too many of these, right? So they want to concentrate resources on fewer number of brands, okay, to cut labor because of the performance problem. It's happening all the time, okay? And then they have to, how to put, enrich the performance metrics for management developments and GBS. Okay, now under this structure, right, their performance is determined entirely by growth, whereas their performance is determined, is measured entirely in terms of efficiency. Okay, customer satisfaction is not there, right? So they figure that this is probably not the best thing, so they decided to add some additional dimension so that you can, when you try to achieve your growth and efficiency target, you have taken into consideration customers' reaction. That's what they try to do. Now, finally, they try to enhance the informal structure by introducing like rotation program, like joint leadership and training program. And okay, so this is related to the thing we talked about earlier. Because under a formal structure, the horizontal connection are lacking. Okay, so you can guess that people would be motivated to create an informal relationship due to their dependence on each other, right? But from the perspective of running this organization, you have to help people achieving that target, right? So you establish rotation program so that people can move back and forth and know each other. You also establish the leadership development program, so leader here and they are putting the same program so that they will get to know each other. Okay, that's one thing. And another thing they also try not to do is detailing the new structure. They intentionally keep it ambiguous. Okay, now that's it. One thing I would like you to think about. Why would they want to keep the new structure at least a little bit ambiguous? What do you get from this? Yes,
Just as an employee working in this company, I think it's probably good that it wasn't, I don't feel too constrained, limited by a very formal structure. And then it also lets the organization maybe establish itself organically to see how it plays out.
Right. Right. So one problem you have when everything is defined is that you feel like you don't have freedom to adjust. That's also a signal that your company does not trust you, right? So your organizational structure provides a basic architecture for people to cooperate and to coordinate, but we leave sufficient room for you to make a decision on how you're going to carry on with your job, right? That is probably better when you believe that you have high quality human resources. We're not operating a factory floor. Try to motivate knowledge worker. You don't have to define everything. Yes, please.
I think in 2005, destruction from
Right.
was happened. So that's why like a lot of people feel anxious about their future,
Mhm.
and they get less motivated by
Mhm.
working in this company.
Right. Right. Yeah, uncertainty can be the problem, especially when you are expecting something like this. The problem, the difficulty with like any kind of downsizing is that when there is a prospect for downsizing, your best guys will be the first to jump ship, right? You are stuck with the second best. So it is very important that you first identify who are your true personality and remove uncertainty in that as quickly as possible. This applies to any context of organizational changes, not just in terms of restructuring, downsizing, but also in terms of, for example, post-merger integration. When you acquire a new company, and they know that some of the people are going to get fired, right? So you have to make sure that you can retain the best in them. Otherwise, it does not, I mean, the company would not deserve that much premium that you pay for, right? So, yes, it's human motivation is another thing. Any further comments, reflections? Yes, please.
Avoiding detailing structure actually helps facilitates cooperation, helps people talk to each other within the organization. It's like dotted line.
Okay. Right, so if we want to go for a formal solution, then this is what we have to do. We first draw like dash line, and then create this decision-making matrix that we have seen before. Right, who wants to do that? I mean, okay, sometimes we have no choice, we have to make things clear. But when it is possible for us to coordinate and cooperate without this process, maybe we should go for that. The cost of generating decision-making grid is actually quite high. You need so many people sitting in a room for a sustained period of time, and that's a waste because when they are having this meeting, they cannot do other things, and chances are they're going to hate each other in the process. Right? So if we can achieve the goal with more informal means, let's go for it. It's probably one consideration. Okay? So we're done with this case. Okay, I need to take record of your attendance and participation today. Ye Kun. Delumi. Betty. Syrian. You?
Oh, yeah.
Oh. 陈哲强。李希。苏刚。Spencer.郑非凡。江建伟。